Alright, so I'm finally getting back to doing actual philosophy here. So I have a lot of things planned. So I'm gonna be reading and going through Maurice Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception finally, and I'm gonna start with the preface. I don't have the whole thing here, but I have just part of it. But I also have the whole thing on my Kindle. Um, on the Kindle, I don't have actual handheld Kindle, but I have a lot of books on the Kindle platform, so I read them on my computer here. Um, so the whole preface is he asks the question, "What is phenomenology?" And he kind of talks about Husserl. He talks about Heidegger, um, and he kind of says that even though we've had all of them, we haven't really answered this question of what phenomenology is. And he kind of talks about the natural attitude. He talks about how um, how he thinks that he's gonna also go into this thing called Gestalt psychology, and I will explain that kind of more succinctly in a different video. So the preface, he asks, what is phenomenology? He discusses how Husserl discussed it in many different ways. How I've talked about this too, about Husserl, how he started in the beginning with his logical investigations, how he started in a way of how he was just kind of talking about them in terms of essences, and how he kind of later kind of turned towards sort of a transcendental phenomenology, or indeed a transcendental idealism, where at first he wasn't really doing that. First he had kind of like a realistic phenomenology, or a more realist sort of thing. He sort of kind of what's some people consider it kind of sad how he sort of ends with having a transcendental idealism. And I discussed that too. And I plan on discussing Husserl more because I have a lot of Husserl books, and I also need to finish the Cartesian meditations, because in the past few years I've done his meditations 1 through 4, but I haven't finished it with the fifth yet. So I do plan on doing that. So he says that phenomenology is the study of essences and all problems concerning them, and the problems that come with essences. So what is a essence? This is what is often referred to by writers of Husserl called eidetic phenomenology, because it concerns essences. An essence is everything that makes something that way. So what is the essence of a pencil? The essence of a pencil involves what it does in a way. It involves its use. It involves what it looks to be. So the essence of a pencil is, and an essence is a very metaphysical thing here. It's a very metaphysical thing that Husserl has posited, and some people don't always agree with that. So how do we define essence? Essence is the essence of perception or consciousness, is sort of what he's getting at, and it puts essence back into existence. Now, a good way to understand phenomenology is essence before existence, where the existentialism following Husserl in Heidegger and Sartre is you have existence before essence. And so phenomenology puts essence back into existence, and to understand man via their facticity, and facticity meaning the way that they are, and understand them how they are. And this is sort of a realism in that the world, as it is prior to reflection, and the whole idea of phenomenology is to understand man, understand perception, understand consciousness, and go from there understanding the world. Now, to understand phenomenology, you have to. The whole idea is to bracket the natural attitude. And the natural attitude is, and it's the way science works, is that there is a real objective world beyond our perception, and they start with things the way they objectively are, and not concerning any of what happens here, not concerning perception at all. And that's the natural attitude in Husserl and Merleau-Ponty, go against this, and they kind of have the phenomenological attitude. And Husserl discusses more in the Crisis of the European Sciences, where he talks about that we have to, in science, we have to bracket the natural attitude, and that we have to start with perception, and then move on to what is objective. So, and in this way, we have sort of we're kind of taking extreme subjectivism and extreme objectivism and sort of putting them together. And I'll kind of explain that more too. So we're trying to give a direct description of experience as it is, and that, we're trying to understand experience, and that's how we're going to be able to understand the world. So for Husserl, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty, we have to understand experience and perception before we can understand the world as it is. So it's kind of interesting because we have a way in which we can have we start with perception, and we understand that there is a objective world because of perception, but there also is this subjectivism because of perception too. So even though we, and it's also in Husserl in his Cartesian Meditations in the fifth meditation, he starts with the Originalsphäre, or the sphere of ownness, of the sphere of what is mine. He starts there, and then he goes off to what is others, to understand the fact that there are others, and thus we get to this idea of intersubjectivity. That's another matter, though. So for Husserl, we do away with psychology, and he talks of a genetic or a constructive phenomenology, and Husserl kind of starts with a static phenomenology, move towards a genetic one, and I've discussed that elsewhere too. So phenomenology is a manner or a style of thinking. It's not a philosophy yet, but it's Merleau-Ponty wants us to sort of understand phenomenology as a manner or style of thought first, before we kind of formulate that into a philosophy. So it's existing as a movement before we arrive at complete awareness of itself as a philosophy. So he wants to start with it being a manner or style of thinking, and then we'll understand it as a philosophy, or as a whole thing. So we find ourselves in a unity and true meaning of, or we find in ourselves a unity and true meaning of phenomenology. So with phenomenology, we start here, not with our body. And Merleau-Ponty does, he discusses embodiment. He discusses the lived body, which I do plan on going into, because I'm going to talk about the preface as I am now, the introduction, and then start with part one, which is the body. So we find in ourselves a unity and true meaning of phenomenology, and it's not so much encountering a new philosophy, but it is phenomenology for ourselves, and the whole universe of science is built upon the world as directly experienced. That's the way we want to go. We don't want to try to build a science upon the natural attitude, which is having a science where we understand the world as it is objectively. We want to understand the world in philosophy and scientifically by how it's experienced, by perception, and that's what this whole book is about. It's perception. So we want to reawaken the basic experience of the world, of which science is the second order expression. So Husserlian phenomenology in its beginnings, it's that I am the absolute source. I alone bring things into being for myself, and I am the exterior from what the world is experienced, and for oneself and others. So there's a lot more to this essay of what is phenomenology. And I think that if you don't know a lot about phenomenology, if you haven't read a ton of Husserl or Heidegger, I think it's necessary to definitely read them, of course. But I think Merleau-Ponty's preface to this book, the preface of the essay called "What is Phenomenology," it's very, very, very awesome to read. Now, I made a video about this a long time ago, so that one might be better than this. I'm not sure, but definitely, I think this is definitely a good, I guess, picture of what was going on from the beginnings of Husserl's phenomenological work through Heidegger and to him. So he talks about Husserl, he talks about what phenomenology is, the way science should be, and the way philosophy should be, and he kind of goes into the introduction, and he talks about things like sensation, attention, and lots of other cool stuff, and which I will discuss also in a different video. And this also involves something called Gestalt psychology. Now, I'm gonna make a video right after this one, which I'm gonna discuss that in more detail. Now, this preface does involve that quite a bit, but I am omitting talking about Gestalt psychology because I want to do that in a different video. And I think to understand, to read Merleau-Ponty, you have to understand phenomenology, which might be harder than understanding Gestalt psychology. Gestalt psychology is a little bit easier to wrap your head around. Maybe not, I don't know. But let me know what you think of this essay if you read it, and let me know if you have any issues or questions, and thank you. So I forgot to add something about the preface. So the chief gain from phenomenology, this is kind of a main point, so I figured I'd better just take that video and this video and smack them together. So the chief gain from phenomenology is to have a united, like I did say this, the united extreme subjectivism and extreme objectivism in the notion of world. So this is kind of a little bit like Heidegger's worldhood, but in a less extremely, in a very different sense, because Heidegger, when you talk about Heideggerian terms, things are very different from if you're talking about Husserl or Merleau-Ponty, because things are just very, very different. Like Heidegger I think that Husserl and Merleau-Ponty are more in common than Heidegger is with either of them. Heidegger, I think, takes things to a different level, and I mean that's just kind of different. And it's kind of like Husserl's Lebenswelt, or the life world, because I should talk about that more too. And it's also like Heidegger's worldhood. And Heidegger's being in time, he goes through a lot of different things, including being in time and being with, and all these different kinds of modes of being. And the fact that we're in a world is one of them, and the worldhood of the world. Phenomenology provides its own foundation and rests on itself, and phenomenology lays down and grounds being. And I find that to be very interesting, because I feel like that if we had a phenomenological epistemology, that we wouldn't really need a foundation, depending on whatever formulation or whatever theory you had. If it involved phenomenology, we wouldn't really need it to have a foundation. I feel like we could just that would be it. And I wrote something about that a long time ago. So sorry about the forgetting these points, which one of them I did explain a little bit. So thanks.